Hey there, you beautiful badass. Welcome to the Keri Croft Show. I'm your host, Keri Croft, delivering you stories that get you pumped up and feeling like the unstoppable savage that you are. So grab your coffee, put on your game face, and let's do this thing, baby. Ready to elevate your self-care game? Boss Gal Beauty Bar is a modern med spa offering everything from cosmetic injectables, lasers and microneedling, to medical-grade facials and skincare. Conveniently located in Clintonville, Grandview, Powell, and Easton, making self-care a priority has never been easier. Use code CROFT for $25 off your first visit.
Summer's coming in hot, but is your skin summer ready? Fine lines, sun damage, melasma. If these are cramping your vibe, the Moxie Laser at Donaldson will leave you glowing. Nervous about lasering your face? I tried Moxie and it was quick and gentle, perfect for first-timers and all skin types. And my results? 10 out of 10. And if you're a first-timer at Donaldson, mention the Keri Croft Show for $100 off your Moxie treatment. Don't say I've never done anything for you.
Chad Underwood, welcome to the Keri Croft Show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I am honored that you're here.
Well, thank you.
Not just because it's you, and I feel like the universe has been conspiring for us to sit together for a couple years now,
Yeah.
like I told you. But then I put out this, we're doing this infertility series, and I was getting my nails done, and it hit me like a ton of bricks where I'm like, okay, I've been so focused on being inclusive. When I was having that mental conversation and having the conversation with Kate, and internally it's like, okay, same-sex couples, check. Okay, women who are 20 years away, check. And it was women. And all of a sudden I'm like, what about the man? So I put that out. You write back rather quickly, hey, my wife lobbed this to me. I want to come in and I want to talk.
Yeah.
So I just feel like this is such an important conversation, and it's rare that we sit with a man who is willing to open up about male factor infertility. So thank you for your vulnerability and for being here.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I think it's something that needs to be talked about from every angle, and I'm just happy to be here. I'm happy to share my story.
So let's start with when you and Keri, your wife, decided you want to have kids. Walk us down the road of when it was like, okay, the signs are pointing towards my sperm.
Yeah, I mean, well, we got married in June of 2018, and then we were, and this isn't necessarily ancillary, but like we were both kind of like ready to start having kids. Like, I was 33, I think, at this time, and we were like, hey, let's start having kids. And so we decided to start trying like around Christmas time of that year. So we'd been married for 6 months. We were going to start trying to get pregnant. There was 6 months where we were just, looking at the calendar and knowing when we were supposed to be having sex and when, things were supposed to be working out, and they just weren't working out. And it was pretty quick time frame. I feel like a lot of couples, it's years or maybe even a decade that could pass when they're trying, they finally start to go down the infertility process. But we were really eager to have children. I remember we went to Hawaii, and Keri was like, if we don't get pregnant when we're in Hawaii, like when we come home, I'm going to set up an appointment with an infertility specialist. And so a month later, we set up an appointment with Dr. Jane up in Westerville. And I think that started like that summer, and we started going through all sorts of like tests. And initially the very first test, like Keri's cycle she didn't have it looked like she might be the issue with her. For whatever reason, that cycle, she didn't have a ton of eggs that she was producing. But then like after 2 more months, the doctor was like, no, like you're fine. We need to start looking at Chad. So then over the next couple of months, like throughout the fall of 2019, I was doing I probably did like 7 or 8 like sperm checks. And eventually it got to the point where they either came back as like trace amounts of sperm or no sperm at all. And then that February was when I had like the final operation. Like I went to go see a urologist and go see a specialist. But then, so like February 2020 was when I had the operation, and so they did like a testicular biopsy, and then they identified that I had no sperm at all. So I was diagnosed with what's called azospermia, and it just means I was born without the capability to process sperm or create sperm.
Because I was going to say, sometimes you can go in and that's a different diagnosis because you have a couple in there and they can take out.
Yes, that was what they were trying to do.
Okay.
He was trying to go in and identify, like, to pull out some sperm if there were any available, and they like ran the tests on it and there were none. And that was tough.
I was going to say, can you take us back to when you heard that, when you're like, wait, there's not one in there? How did that impact you and what did you think? How did you process?
Well, I guess the immediacy of when I found out, I was still under the influence of the anesthesia. So like, it was kind of like I was in a really big fog. So I didn't really, like, I was like coming up from being under in the surgery. And so Keri was there with me. And I remember her just kind of like breaking down and crying. But I still don't think I was like fully like alert. Like, I was having the conversation with him, but I was in a fog. And then like I slept for another couple hours, and then we got home, and then we actually like had the conversation. And that was when like it really hit me, like, okay, like in my mind, and this isn't how I feel in any way, shape, or form, in my mind, that was like, I'm not going to be a father. And I always wanted to be a dad. I love my kids to death. Being a dad is such a big part of my life now, which I'm sure we'll get to. But in that moment, it felt like the dream of us being parents was over. The one thing that I do remember very vividly that the urologist said, and it was something that I thought was so important for me to process, and I don't think I processed it fully for like a long time. A lot of the concern on when we started this was like, were there factors that I could have, a lot of the factors were like, do you spend excessive time in heat? Okay, well, I teach hot yoga. I'm in that hot room, 8-10 hours a week. So I spend a lot of time in a 100-degree room. Have you ever spent a lot of time with like electronics on your lap? Well, like when I was in college, I remember sitting with my laptop like on my lap all the time, right? So like that was another factor. And then the third one was like, do you smoke marijuana? And there was a period of my time where I was smoking a lot of marijuana. So I'm like, these 3 strikes are against me. But what he said was like, you were 1 in 10,000. Like, there's nothing you could have done that could have changed this outcome for you. Like, this is you were diagnosed with this. Like, this was here from the moment you were born. And that did help me cope, to know that like, even if there were all these external factors that maybe like would have prevented me from having sperm and having my own genetic children, like the end result could never have been changed because of that's just who I am. And that's part of my identity.
So you get hit with this diagnosis, which I can imagine on so many fronts was a lot to you probably are still processing. I mean, that's, that's a big, big thing. Especially as we discussed and you discussed in your intake form, just this whole idea of masculinity in our culture and the way that conceiving between, like when guys are having a beer and they're talking and it's like, oh, you got the strong swimmers and like penis size. I mean, name it. Like it's a whole bro culture where it's like, you're not comfortable being like, hey, by the way, I don't make any sperm. Like that had to be like a whole thing. But let's go into when you and Keri realize this door is closed for you guys to naturally conceive. So now we have other doors that we need to look at, right? We have the adoption door, we have the donor door, or we have the childless by choice door. Yeah. And how did that conversation come about, and who was the antagonist, and like how did that all go?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, we probably looked at all the doors. And, even looking back now, it was like funny. I mean, I think some of the jokes that we made were like coping mechanisms. But I remember at one point we were at a friend's house. They have condos in like the Park's Edge apartments downtown. And we went to this party at the Park's Edge, and we're in like, I can't remember who said the joke or whatever, but it was like, well, I mean, like this could just like, we could just live here forever. Like we could just live in this building. And like, if we're not going to have kids, like let's move, let's live the cosmopolitan Columbus life and live in the high rise. And that's going to be what we do. And that was like one thing that we talked about. But I think ultimately what it came down to it is like, I still remember when Keri and I were on our second date. And from the time of our second date, we knew like we were meant to be together. And like one of the earliest conversations that we had was that we both wanted to be parents and like we wanted to have a family. And I think anytime we like started to talk about being the cool aunt and uncle because we had some nieces and nephews, or like, let's live the high rise life and just not worry about it. Like, let's move out of our suburban home and back into the city. That wasn't going to give us the life that we wanted and like the fulfillment. And so then we started to talk about other avenues. Once we got to the point where I was diagnosed with the azospermia, and we went to, like, we kept talking with Dr. Jane and like figuring out how we were going to do this. It was really a function of like, how is this going to look? And there is the donor route. And I remember there was a conversation, and Keri reminded me of this a couple of days ago, that like she was adamant for a period of time that like if I had to do a sperm donor, that she was going to do an egg donor. And that even if she carried the baby, like she wanted it to be an egg donor because she felt so guilty about me not being able to have my genetic children that she was willing to forego the children being her genetic children. Yeah. And I was like, you're crazy. Absolutely not. Like, we're not, like, that's not an option. That's not on the table. But we had those conversations. I was like, no, like, our children should at least half be genetically ours. Like that, like I wanted that so much for her. And so then we started going down the sperm donor route and looking into it. And that was an experience in and of itself, which like on some levels looking back on was like kind of interesting. Like it's fascinating to think about, but in the moment, like shopping for sperm donors was like so incredibly heartbreaking.
Well, I mean, you think about just Tinder or Hinge for dating.
Which is how Keri and I met. We met on Tinder.
but then you take it like 3 steps further. You're like, never thought I would be looking for someone who looks similar to me, that has the same height, the same, and to carry my child. I mean, it's definitely not something that anybody would ever think they would be experiencing, but such is life.
Yeah.
I mean, right?
I mean, there's certain things that you can control, or there's certain things that you can't control. And like, I can't control the fact that I can't produce sperm, but we can control how we react to the circumstances that we were under. And I think that in the grand scheme of things, as heartbreaking as all of it was, we still knew what the end goal was. And we were both willing to work together to get to this point where we have our 2 children. But like the sperm donor piece was just like, it was tough for both of us, but it's really weird, like feeling like you're shopping on Amazon for yourself. Like it's like, and the sperm bank stuff, like for anybody out there who hasn't like been through this, it's wild because there's like 20 or so throughout the country, and Dr. Jane presents you with this list of like, and his first recommendation is just so you know, like, don't go with the sperm bank from like Ohio. And at first you're like, okay, like cool, like whatever. He's like, no, like you don't understand, like, you don't want your kid being at like the high school prom and their date looks a lot like your kid because it's actually the same sperm donor. So he's like, pick a random sperm bank from like wherever. So I think ours is like Washington or California or something like that. And so you start shopping, you start filtering out like, somebody who's between 5'11" and 6'1", brown hair, German and Scottish descent. Like you can go as far down as like, education level. So like I have a law degree. So it's like, you can say postgraduate degrees. Like there's so many different little factors that you can do. And then it just pumps out like 7 people, and all you see are their like childhood photos. And this kid, I'll never forget it. Like when I was a kid, I was a huge Michael Jordan fan, as like, I'm pretty sure everybody around my age was. And this 4-year-old looked exactly like me. And he was wearing a Chicago Bulls jersey. And so then we open up the like the form, and you can see like hobbies or whatever he's into. And he was like, gave up a life of like law. He was a lawyer, gave up a life of law and like to become an artist. So he has like this creative side. And then in his spare time, like loved practicing yoga. And it was like, that's the guy. Like, wherever he is, like that's perfect. Like it's as close to me as we're going to get. And when you look at Brady, I mean, he looks a lot like me, even though he's not genetically my child.
Can you think back, like when was your, I think, lowest point with all of this mentally?
and this is less, I mean, this is still like an infertility conversation, but it's a little bit like ancillary world stuff. I mean, so my operation for the testicular biopsy was February 28th of 2020. And then, you know, owning a business that's primarily dependent on people coming into your doors and practicing in the heat with the hot yoga studio, March 14th or 15th, we had to shut the studio down and we didn't know when we'd reopen. So within the span of 2 weeks, I get, you know, this news that I think I'm never going to become a father. And then all of a sudden I think like, are we going to be able to pay our rent? Like, are we going to have to file bankruptcy? Like what's like, it seems so silly now to think about, but in that moment, like it was true terror and fear. Like I had no idea what was about to happen. And so that like spring, summer was like just mentally just not a good place. I was throwing myself into teaching like the online streaming yoga classes, just as many as I could possibly do. I was throwing myself into like working on the business and trying to come up with like plans for what would happen if we wouldn't reopen. Like I just remember trying to deflect and not thinking about anything having to do with home because I was so devastated in what was going on. I think my tendency is when rather than process grief immediately, I tend to throw myself into something else and deflect. And then eventually it hits you really hard. And that summer, I remember there was a day where I just remember a day where we were sitting at home and probably like drinking wine on the couch. And it was like right about when we did the sperm donor thing. And it was just not a good situation. I remember breaking down. I wasn't sleeping. I was waking up in the middle of the night and wouldn't be able to go back to sleep for like 3 hours at a time. Just all of the fear and anxiety and stress that I was under was catching up to me. And then it became a function of like, okay, we really need to talk about this and start processing it and start moving through it. But it didn't happen immediately. It was probably another 3 to 4 months until I started going to see a therapist and starting to work through kind of like how it was really impacting me rather than deflecting it. And that was really hard on Keri too, because I think that it's so hard when you're in it with someone, it's hard to talk to that someone and work through the problem together without talking to somebody else first. And I was so scared to talk to anybody about what I was going through, let alone somebody who was close to me, like a friend or a confidant, that the only way that I was able to work through the trauma that I had gone through was by talking to this outside therapist that I had never met me before in my life. And that I found that to be a really productive way to work through the struggles that I was having.
Aside from Keri and this therapist, who did you lean on in your support system? Anyone? Did you share this with anyone?
So I did. Luckily, I have an amazing team at Modo. And they were knowing what I was going through because before I had my big operation in February, I had to stop teaching in the heat because they thought that maybe like, hey, if I remove myself from the heat for a couple of months, then maybe that would enable my sperm to get going. Turns out that wasn't the case. But so I had like all my team members and the teachers and even some students at Modo were reaching out like, hey, you're not on the schedule. Like, what's going on? Is everything okay? So I did have to kind of rely on some people there, like especially our studio manager, Leanne, and some of our like big teachers. And I remember I talked about it in a staff meeting. So the Modo community really helped me to process. And that community in general is like, we're a pretty emotional community. We're all about being together and kind of helping push through like tough times for everybody. And also using yoga as like a stress coping mechanism and a way to work through past traumas and self-healing. You know, the Modo community, I would say, especially our studio manager, Leanne, like she was a confidant. But as far as like anybody else, not really. It was kind of tough for me because I think in some ways, like our parents' tendencies are ingrained in us. And so I know that my mom had me when she was 40 and my mom had 8 miscarriages. And so I remember, this is even well before like the infertility stuff started. I remember my mom telling me that, well, like we just didn't talk about it. Like, and this is back in the 70s and 80s. Like, I just never talked to anybody about this. I'm like, Mom, you went through 8 miscarriages and never talked to anybody about this. And so I think when I was starting to go through this process, like I was like, well, I have to internalize it as well, because in my mind, I was thinking, well, that's what my mom did. Like that was like my experience with infertility. But once I started, Keri and I started making that commitment to try to work through this stuff both together and with our own therapists, because we had our own individual therapists, and then we had a couple therapy sessions together. Once that happened, we started getting more comfortable talking with people about this. And then you started realizing just how many other people were going through what you are. And now that this kickstart kind of jogs some of my memory too, like we did have a couple, one of our dearest friends, they were kind of like our confidants, because they were the ones that now this is clicking back in my mind. They were the ones that recommended us to Dr. Jane. So there was one couple friend of ours that had gone through infertility, and they had used Dr. Jane to have their 2 children. And so that kind of like led us to go to him in the first place. And then it was like once people started finding out and were aware that we had our journey, then we became those confidants for other people that were on their journeys. And so it is this kind of like beautiful like community in and of itself of people that have gone through this together, that we can all, once you start to have the conversations, you realize just how many other couples are being impacted by this.
I think it's the beauty of transparency with anything. When you're fully open and transparent about something, it is such an attractor to everyone. And it's amazing the things that'll come. Just this show alone, like I can't wait to see the males that kind of come around.
I hope so.
Like, wait, oh, absolutely. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
And it was, what was that like though with your bros? Like hanging out, watching golf, like, hey dude, how do people support you? Did they like, hey dude, like how did that go?
There's a mental exercise of like, do I need to correct this person or do I not need to correct this person? Like if it's somebody who I just met, I might never see them again. Like I'm not going to spend the time of like trying to correct that person, because I don't know if I'm ever going to see them again. They don't necessarily need to know. But if it's
You're talking about if somebody asks, like says something about
in general, just about like whatever. Like I remember, so one experience was, and I play a lot of golf, and I remember when Keri was pregnant the first time, we were walking down the fairways, and I've heard this hundreds and hundreds of times from people where it's like, oh yeah, Keri's pregnant. Congrats on the sex. Like, okay, cool. Like, got it. Okay. I remember like it was a good buddy of mine. He said that, and I had to go through this exercise. I'm like, this is somebody that I know, not a lot of time with, but somebody that I see regularly. This is somebody that knows my wife, will know my family. Like I need to take this to be the moment and be like, hey, just like, so that's actually not how this worked. I can't have my own children. And sometimes you see the reaction and they're like their jaws drop. But I think that's important for people to realize that even just like something seemingly innocent as like, hey, that's so great, congrats on the sex, which I think I don't really love that comment anyways, but like that's what people do and that's what people say. That can be incredibly hurtful for people to hear, or whatever it might be. Like, hey, yeah, like great, like let's do our masculine comments about whatever it is. And it's like, even though I might be sitting here as somebody who likes to golf and likes to go out and drink beers, like those comments can be incredibly hurtful to me. Or even something as simple as, and I see this happen both with men and especially like a lot of older ladies who meet my child. They're like, oh my God, he looks just like you. And it's like, well, yeah, he does, but that comment alone, even though that's the first thing that somebody says, is like a twist of the knife in my belly every time I hear that. And so then I go through the mental exercise again, like, do I correct this person? Do I not correct this person? Like, and part of that is also my own preservation of my own mental state, because like some people, like, I just don't want to correct them because I don't want to then have to explain it and go through the story, and like it becomes like reliving these like little nightmares all the time. But then some people like need to know because they're going to be in my life for extended periods of time. So every single time there's a conversation that could potentially come about of it, it is like rehashing those nightmares.
Listen, nobody loves laundry day. But thanks to the Fluff, laundry is officially off your to-do list. Just schedule your pickup on the Fluff app, toss your dirty clothes in any bag you've got, and leave it on your front porch. The Fluff handles the rest, returning your laundry fresh, folded, and in our reusable vinyl bag in just 24 to 48 hours. Flat rate pricing means you stuff the bag full, and yes, pickup and delivery are totally free in Central Ohio. Use promo code Keri for 20% off your first order. P.S. Ask about our monthly subscription to keep life simple and your laundry done.
Hey, Maria Milligan here with RE/MAX Premier Choice. Being a realtor here means being part of a community. I'm more than just a business card. I'm someone you'll see around town. I build trust with my clients because I care about this community and the people in it. Ready to take that next step? Let's do it together. Text me at 614-314-1355.
Who says you need a special occasion to feel like a celeb? I mean, stress is real. Life is busy. And your scalp? Yeah, it deserves some love too. That's where Headspace by Mia Santiago comes in. Treat yourself or someone who deserves it to a luxurious scalp treatment and a killer blowout or cut, because nothing says main character energy, honey, like a fresh style from celebrity stylist Mia and her team. And because we love a good deal, mention the Keri Croft Show and get 20% off your service or any gift card for somebody in your life that you love. Headspace by Mia Santiago, because great hair days shouldn't be rare. Did you guys ever consider adoption, or how did that conversation go?
We definitely talked about it. We were also, and I'll be the first to say, like, we were incredibly fortunate in that Keri's job covered IVF. So for us, when it started being a function of like even a financial decision, which is like incredibly fucked up that we even have to think about it that way. But like when we started looking at like the financials of doing adoption versus the financials for us individually of doing IVF, number one, IVF at least gave Keri the opportunity to carry her own child and all that sort of stuff. But then also like it was covered by insurance. So we'll be the first to say like we are incredibly thankful to DSW or designer brands that like they even offered that for their employees. But that's kind of like IVF was always more preferable. Adoption was probably on the table, but we were like, that was like the next step. It was like, if IVF doesn't work, then we'll go down that road.
I guess, what would you say to people out there who are supporting someone who's going through something like this, knowing that it is super sensitive, knowing that a very benign comment can really twist a knife that you wouldn't even intend? How can someone best support someone going through this type of journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a tough question because I don't fault people for just, like the offhanded comment, like, oh my God, he looks so like you. Like that is a very natural thing to want to say. And I don't even, because I'm sure that before I went through this, I said that to my friends as kids or, we're around people that said that. And it never even registered in my mind. But I think it's important for reframing, just even if you don't know if a person's going through it, reframing my own mindset and like, I'm never going to say those things again. Like those aren't comments that I'm going to make to people. And if people can be aware of just how many individuals are going through these journeys, even if it's an offhanded comment or something that you've said for generations, like it might be something that needs to change, and maybe we reframe how we have those conversations. And that's not easy to do. I will say that like if you're aware that somebody that in your life is going through this journey, the biggest thing that I can say is just be supportive. I mean, there are so many, ask questions, because the more we can talk about it, the more we can cope and process it, and the more we feel like people are understanding and respectful of what it is that we're going through. Like the end goal is to have this beautiful thing, this beautiful child. And that's what we ultimately wanted. And we wanted people and to have conversations with people that wanted to support us in that goal. If people don't want to talk about it, that's okay too. But I think it's just important to support folks that that are going through this journey, because, every person's going to process it and go through it in their own way. But even if it's just a function of like, I'm just going to come over and hang out with you for a night, we don't have to talk about anything. We can watch the football game, or we can go for a walk and we can talk about whatever. Or for me, it was like, let me find people that I know that I can go spend 9 holes of golf with or go take a yoga class with, and just people that I felt good being around that were helping me get through it. Even if it wasn't a function of like, we're actually going to sit down and talk about it, because sometimes that's not what I wanted to do.
What's the plan for transparency with the kids?
We're already talking about it. One of the things that so whenever you're going through this, and like Dr. Jane, part of the process with him is you have to have at least one conversation before you go through this journey. You have to have a conversation with a therapist. And one of the things that the therapist that we met with recommended, not like steadfast, you have to do this, but was that start talking to your children about this as early as possible. Like from the moment that they can talk, start talking to them. And I remember she threw us like some books that like talked about being a donor baby, you know, all that sort of stuff. And we didn't buy those, but like from early on, as soon as Brady, our first kid, started talking, we started having the conversation with him that, you know, hey, there's 4 people. You know, most people have a mommy and daddy that help make their kids. And for you, there were 4 people that were involved. There was mommy brought her belly, daddy brought his heart, doctor brought his mind, and the donor brought the missing piece. And if you sit down with Brady and you say, Brady, hey, how many people helped make you? And he'll say 4. And he'll say mommy, daddy, doctor, donor. And it is like the cutest way that he says it. But like the fact that he's 3 years old and is already aware and processing that information will make it easier for him to cope with that and eventually make the decision as to whether or not he wants to meet his donor when he turns 18, which is another part of the process, because you can leave it open or closed. But for us, we decided to leave it open. So when he turns 18, that's going to be an opportunity where he can reach out to his donor if he wants. He has to be the one to initiate that. And then that'll probably make me go through a whole nother like set of emotions and trauma and processing at that point if he chooses to do that, but that's okay. So yeah, those conversations are already happening.
As he grows and your love for him grows, as it does, how does that change the internal wrestling match that you have inside of like, oh, I'm not the biological father, but I love this child so much? Do you feel like that wrestling match it's getting easier?
Well, in my mind, I'm thinking of the fact that our son is not sleeping through the night right now and screaming in the middle of the night. So I'm like, yeah, you're not my child. But you know, that's like my first reaction.
Oh, that's
right
great.
Now. But no, I mean, I think there's always an internal wrestling match that's going on. One thing that I've come to understand is that like parenthood can mean a lot of things. There are a lot of genetic parents out there that aren't involved in their children's lives at all. And if you spend any significant amount of time with myself and my kids, like those kids, like there's no part of me that doesn't feel like their father. And just because they might not genetically be mine, like I love those too. And sometimes the 3-year-old is he's difficult to love sometimes, but like, you know, I mean, I look at those two and like we are a family, and I will do anything for the rest of my life to protect those two and to care for them and to provide for them. And just because I went through this journey, I think in some ways it probably, with Keri and I, the fact that we went through this journey together makes it mean that much more to be parents and to have these special moments with our kids. It's more when the twist of the knife moments happen. I don't think of it like 98% of the time, but those 2% of the time that you do, yeah, it is hard. But I just have to remind myself, like, just because they might not genetically be mine doesn't mean that they're not my children. And yeah, that's kind of how I try to remember that. There's a lot of different paths to parenthood. You have to accept that everybody's journey to parenthood is different. And mine just looked a little bit different than some. I wouldn't even say most at this point. Who knows? It doesn't change the fact that those are my kids or our kids. I know Keri's not here, but I'm acting as if she was.
Well, I was going to say, if she ever wanted to come back with you,
Yeah.
I do threesomes in here. You know, very clean threesomes. Anything that we've forgotten that you're going to be like, if you leave here, anything about the journey that we haven't touched on that you feel?
That especially with male males who have infertility issues, the emotional trauma that takes on the partner as well. It's such a first of all, like pregnancy and giving birth is like such this incredibly traumatic but beautiful event, like for Keri, right? Like she goes through 9 months of her body feeling like crap, but it's not just the 9 months. It's also the 6 months of shots that we had to administer beforehand. And like, I had to look at that and be like, if I wasn't the way that I was, she wouldn't have to be doing this. So that was part of the processing for me, but then also recognizing that like she's going through her own journey with this because she's having to do these shots and I'm having to put a 3-inch long needle in my wife's butt every night. And if I'm out of town or there was a period where I was traveling for work, then she was either having to self-administer or have friends come over and do this. And then also her emotional processing the fact that like her children weren't going to be genetically mine as well. Like it's a separate emotional journey that we were taking on in different wavelengths. One of the things that I remember big time was like when and we talked about this a lot. This isn't necessarily even an infertility journey, but even more just like a pregnancy journey is like her life got rocked the moment she got, like really even before we got pregnant, because she stopped drinking. She, was trying to eat clean for the baby. And like, then all of a sudden, especially with the shots, like all the hormonal changes that she was going through, like, even though I might've been emotionally going through this, I could still go out with my friends and have beers. I was still going out to play golf. I was still being able to do all the things that I had done until the baby came. And so like, there's probably this year-long process in between when like her world got rocked and my world got rocked. So we were both going through this like traumatic journey together, but separate. And that made for some really difficult and rocky situations that I hope she would say that I processed a lot better the second time than I did the first time around. Because I'll be the first to say that I probably wasn't the best partner the first time around when we were going through all this. Partially because I think I was deflecting. I was like diving into my business. I was like trying to do anything that I could to stop processing this. There were some really difficult moments as a relationship that we went through, both infertility wise and also pregnancy wise, before we had our kids.
Yeah. And I think it is important for everyone to know, if you're going through infertility in your marriage, we know what you're going through in terms of it's not going to be what you're sold before you get, walking down the aisle and everything's hunky dory. And that's okay. It's part of in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health. I think people are just as trepidatious to talk about their marital issues, if not more, than even infertility. Yeah. I mean, God forbid you tell anyone that you're having marital problems because everyone thinks you're great. No, they don't. Like, we all see it. We all understand. It's part of the process. And if you're going through those rocky times, I mean, you are going to process things differently, especially if you are of a different gender. Sorry, like we process things different. And like what you just explained, your wife is going through all of these wild changes that you as a male, you just have a seat with your popcorn going, what the fuck is happening? Yeah. Right? And so that's just owning that and maybe trying to understand the other side a little bit with a little more compassion. Yeah. Because we do, like a lot of us infertility girlies will go hard in the paint on our spouses. Like, all he has to do is put it in a cup and all he has to do is perform this. Like, that's what you hear, right? But the man is going through his own thing. Yeah. It's you just have to like give grace at a time where you're going through like the craziest storm ever.
Yeah. I mean, and even situations like from the male perspective, I mean, so yeah, you asked that question about dark times, and there's so many that it's almost like hard to process it, but like, so that act of like ejaculating into a cup is so like difficult to process, because like as you're doing it, you're like, why the fuck am I doing this? Like, why do I have to do this? Like, why all of my friends are getting their wives pregnant, like no problem whatsoever. I remember there was there was a really dark conversation where one of our family members, they were like afraid to tell us that they had gotten pregnant because they knew what we were going through, and they had just started trying in the first month they got pregnant. And I remember when they told them, like, all four of us were like crying by the end of the conversation because like they had this moment of like immense joy, and we had this moment of immense sadness, and then we kind of took that joy away from them because we were so sad about like that. But like, so then, you know, you have situations like that where you hear these stories about somebody getting pregnant immediately, and then I'm sitting here jacking off into a cup and taking it to the facility for like processing. And then I have this traumatic event that I talked about in the intake form where like the first time I ejaculated into the cup, I was like, this is it. Like, this is it. I know there's sperm in there. Like, we are done. So I screw the lid on, I put it in the bag, I take it to the clinic, and I open up the bag, and I must not have screwed it on tight enough, and it just like went everywhere in the bag. And I remember in that moment just feeling like, you are such a fuck up. Like, that was it. Like, you were set, you were good. Turns out I wasn't good, but like, I remember leaving that, like having to walk out with like another cup. I was going to have to go home and go do it again and like bring it back. And I just remember feeling like so broken. And so then I was like, well, I'm never going to go do that again. Like, I'm never going to like jack off at home into a cup. And so like, they're like, well, you can just do it here at the facility. So
Even better.
So it's like, oh, cool. All right, cool, Dr. Jane. So you go into Dr. Jane's office and they have an ejaculation room and there's like a bunch of porno mags on the floor. And I'm like,
And you know they're Dr. Jane's like last year's issues.
well, I'm like, what the hell? Like, is this 1988? Like, you can pull something up on your phone at this point. Like, it was just the whole process and blood tests. And like, I mean, Keri and I were so desensitized by needles by the end of all this because we were just both getting poked and prodded like the entire time, whether it be her with her shots or me like with my blood work. I mean, it was like we were just going in all the time for all this stuff.
How did Keri handle hearing that you had, you know, fumbled the ball on that sample and it was all over the bag? How do you call her? So, honey, listen, love you a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
I have some news.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that. I actually do remember calling her. It was you're on the way home, or it was when she got home that night, and from work or whatever. And I do remember like she could tell how visibly upset I was by what had happened. That like she didn't really, if she was up, like she was more like supporting me because like it was clear that I was like completely broken at that point. Like that was probably the darkest, even like going back to thinking about what we were talking about. Like that was probably the moment where I was like, fuck, like I don't know if I can do this. And everybody has one of those like rock bottom moments. And for me, that was it when I was like, yeah, this is it. And then you just go straight to the bottom. But I think one thing to note with that and everything is that one of the things when I talk about like in my yoga classes is that like life is full of peaks and valleys. And there are always lows and there are always highs, but we have to do what best we can to manage and try to stay in the balance. If you're at the darkest of darks, life will come back to balance. If you're at the peak, it's not always going to stay there. It will come back down. So just trying to rely on people that you care about, have conversations that matter, do things that you love. Like for me, it's golf and practicing yoga. Like those are the two things that I love to do, making sure that I'm doing a good job to take care of myself so I can take care of the other people too. In my life that I love. And, you know, that applies everywhere. That doesn't just apply through this, but, you know, that was a low, but like, you know, I took the kids to Disney last week. That was the high, you know, like watching Brady get so excited about meeting Mickey Mouse. It was like, this is why we did this. This is the payoff. And every day there's moments like that.
How important has yoga been in your healing and your journey? And
I mean, I think really it's interesting because it's probably shifted. Whereas like relying on the physical practice of yoga for so long was so important for me. Now it's a function of like time. Like I've made the commitment that I'm going to be a father first. So I'm not at the studios as much. I'm not like when it comes down to 5 o'clock, like I'm home and I'm with the kids and I'm there for bedtime. While I might not get to personally practice as much, that doesn't mean I'm not practicing. It's turned into a lot of like self-practice at home. It's turned into a lot of like sleep meditations because sleep has become a challenge, both getting to sleep and like just getting enough sleep in general. So putting on sleep meditations before I go to bed to help me just calm down and go to sleep. But I try to practice twice a week. It doesn't always happen, but at least I get to teach. And in some ways, the teaching has become like the yoga for me, even though I'm not practicing when I teach. But it is incredibly therapeutic because either practicing or teaching, because, if you're practicing, you get to move your body, you get to cleanse, you get to be alone with your thoughts for an hour, which we never really get to do. And in our studios, like no phones, so no distractions. It's just you, your mat, and your breath for 60 minutes, which is wonderful. And it's a way to detach from everything that you've got going on. Like everything that you had coming into that room is still going to be there when you walk out, but maybe you just feel a little bit better when you walk out, a little bit lighter. And then, when I'm teaching, we always set intentions as instructors at the beginning of class. And usually my intention is going to be something that I'm working through. So it helps me to like mentally process what I'm going through in my own life. And then I share that with my students and hopefully it lands with a few of them. And, we can connect on that after class.
Well, I was at Modo recently. I'm embarrassed to say that was my first time.
That's
but
okay.
I was there. I loved it. I love the space. I love the energy.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. The one's on Dublin Road.
Yep.
And then the new one's in Clintonville on High Street.
Yes. Just south of Graceland Shopping Center.
Yeah, so if you haven't heard of Modo yet and you love yoga, I highly recommend getting your arse and your mat to Modo, whether Chad's teaching or not. I can't remember what's the name of your studio manager in Dublin Road?
Leanne.
So I think Leanne taught and she was
She's
lovely.
amazing.
Chad, I cannot thank you enough for being here
Thank
and
you so
sharing
much,
your
Keri.
story. And I know there are so many men out there that are kind of breathing a little sigh of relief right now, like, I'm not alone. So it's huge. And it was nice to finally lock eyes with you.
Yeah, 100%.
And I'm going to take one of your classes soon.
Please do.
You can bet on that.
Yeah, and I mean, look, if there are men out there that even want to connect, I know you have my Instagram. I don't know if you're going to post it or whatever, but like, I'm open to talking about this. And I've helped a lot of my friends through this. And like, if you're struggling, like, know that that's okay. And know that you can reach out to somebody, even if it's me. Like, if it's me, great. If it's not me, that's fine too. But like, doors open, DMs are open. Like, feel free to reach out to me too.
I love that. And if you're still out there following your girl, follow me on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, keep moving, baby.